So now, health is one thing, education is another thing to be included in society. It is quite important. So people with autism, and very early, and even maybe earlier than the other children, need to receive education as early as possible. That's really the intervention. The intervention at the early age is really an educational intervention. As far as possible, really. And not in the opinion of people, but because that the person is capable of, the people with the children with autism must be included in mainstream schools. And then must be also included, well, if I may say so, receive education in special schools, but only if inclusion in mainstream schools is not possible, and if this decision is agreed with the parents. But it's important, and I advocate the fact that if you want an adapted education and really respect the right to education of people with autism, you must not stride through special education. It is very important too. But it is very important that both ordinary schools, special schools, which could actually be the same, you could have special classes in ordinary schools, it's very important to have the link between both, to permit the transition between both at different moments of the life of the child. So as I said, the education needs to be adapted. Adapted also, and apart from teaching academic skills, which is something that everybody can receive, it's extremely important for our children to prepare them for an independent life. So education goes further than just the, in quote, the school education. It is important also for them to learn behaviors and social skills. This belongs to education. So everything that I say, just a parenthesis, it is not, just, I would have loved so, but this is not the produce of my mind, of my thoughts, of my hopes, whatever. This is the product of case law, of legal reports done by authorities interpreting the treaties and the legal texts. Because this is really what also the authorities mean by right to education, right to healthcare, and so on. So again, these must be these principles must really be tools for you. Now, never forget the very importance of education of adults. Adult education must also be granted all lifelong, and not only special education, but also training, special education or mainstream education, but also training in basic skills, self-management, living skills, and at all ages, adapted also, at each age. So now, for those who can go to work, who can work, and apart from education, and education all lifelong, and remember that the principle of this education all lifelong has been recognized by the Charter on Social Rights, I will speak about in a few minutes, which is a European treaty ratified by most, if not all, the countries, the member states of the Council of Europe. So, of course, the right to work for those who can't work, definitely, it is extremely important. So, either we adjust the working conditions to the needs of the person with autism in the ordinary working environment, and we had yesterday some extremely interesting presentation on employment of people with autism, or where this is not possible due to the severity of the disability, we may create sheltered employment according to the level of disability. So in this respect, and as for education, it's really important to always remain flexible, to permit transition between both. And to permit then, because of this transition, because of this flexibility, a true career and a career for the adult who could at each moment of his life work in an area or another area. So now, aside of health, education, work, of course they do have also the right to private life and to private housing. And this is a real issue for adults. Needless to say that there is an urgency to close large institutions. If we want to integrate our people into the society, to include them into the society, they have to live like us as much as possible. So it is extremely important to redefine, if necessary, some very little, small institutions for those who need really a constant support. But it's important to permit them to live at home as independently as possible, to also create, specific home services, specific familial institutions, in order to recreate specific homes for them. And this is extremely important for the dignity of the people. It is extremely important, right, to private life. To private life means also to separate the day from the night. Because I do not think that there is a lot of private life or feeling of home, sweet home, private housing, when these people do live constantly all the year long, all the life long, in the same place and just across a courtyard, from night to day and from day to night. This is something we need to break, the day and the night, in order to also, give them the feeling that there is home sweet home and there is the daily activities. Needless to say that to achieve all these goals and to implement and to render effective all these rights, we need competent people. So competent general practitioners and specialists as far as the medical issues are concerned, qualified personnel in charge of education, of training, of job coaching, adequate education and training, of course, and very important also, interdisciplinary teams. To put, the definition of the life program, if I may say so, must be interdisciplinary. So, of course, all these goals, all these rights, you're going to tell me it's very expensive. Yes and no, because if you compare the budget to the real national budget of each state, fortunately enough, disabled people and autistic people in particular are not so numerous. And when you really estimate the cost, it is a cost that many states in Europe could afford if they wanted to. That's another issue. They do afford many other things. They could do it. Even, I think, in these difficult economical times. So, but that's, at least, let's go and let's advance. But keep in mind that a right, a fundamental right, the word fundamental is not just, to make it nice. It means that these universal rights, these fundamental rights, these human rights are above the others. So it is not a choice for the state to decide to define or not this right. It is really a duty. It is a national responsibility. It is, of course, the role of the society as a whole, the states, definitely, but also, the professionals acting with our children. So now I just want to look at my watch, be sure that I'm not too long. So very quickly, I will present the collective complaint procedure, because I wanted just to present, the principles, but also how they can be not implemented, but let's say it's a procedure permitting the Council of Europe forcing a state to implement and to render effective the rights which are concerned. So There is at the level of the Council of Europe. The Council of Europe is the second European organization. It is set in Strasbourg, and there is, the Court on Human Rights that everybody knows, and there is the Convention on Human Rights. There is also, besides, then the European Social Charter, which is the second treaty of the Council of Europe, which defines all the economic rights, so healthcare, education, employment, social integration, and of course the principle of non-discrimination on all these rights. And it is not the Court on Human Rights which is in charge of controlling the respect of these social and economic rights. It is the Committee of Social Rights. And so when there is an issue at the national level, we may have the possibility to lodge a collective complaint against a state, accusing the fact that, for example, and it happened on the side of Autism-Europe, the right to education is not implemented and is not respected towards the people with autism. And it is an easier procedure than the procedure, of course, before the European Court on Human Rights, because when you want to lodge a complaint before the European Court, it is only for individual cases, not collective. It is not on the same rights either, and you need to go across all the national procedures, all the steps of the national procedures, and sometimes it takes about 10 years before reaching the court. This is not the case for the collective complaint. You don't need to go to the national courts. You directly go to Strasbourg, and that's quite efficient in this respect. So that's, as I said, the role of the Committee of Social Rights, which is like the court, but composed differently, in charge of controlling the respect of the European Social Charter, which, just a parenthesis, does not have to be confused with the European, with the Declaration on Fundamental Rights of the European Union. That's not the same text. So just one thing to note, that if you want to lodge a complaint against a state, there are very few states in Europe which accepted the fact to be to be accused under the social charter, and towards which you can lodge a collective complaint. Up to now, there are 14 states: Belgium, Bulgaria, Croatia, Cyprus, Finland, France, Greece, Ireland, Italy, Netherlands, Norway, Portugal, Slovenia, and Sweden. And, that was the state of the situation 3 months ago. So I doubt that it has evolved a lot since then.